got me on the mic, now let's spill the tea. Talking courtside dreams from history. Legends on the blacktop now and then. From Wilt to Steph, we hit it again. Better chimes in, let's go deep. Young blood's rising, can't skip a beat. Puppy prospects with fire in their eyes. Draft night suckers and hoop dream highs. Wire to wire, bring the heat. Podcast magic can't be beat. Do better, but roll better. But who cares? Trendsetters.
It's poppin', y'all. It's your boy. It is Guard E3. And welcome back to the And One podcast, where today we will be bringing you our All-NBA teams from the 2000s decade. But before we get there, let me introduce you to the greatest co-host of all time. Ladies and gentlemen, he is Mo Better. How you doing, Mo?
Doing amazing. Getting ready to chop it up with you, talk hoops, talk about the great players, the All-NBA teams of the 2000s. Let's go.
But before we get there, Mo, we was doing underrated player of the week. Well, this week we're gonna do we're gonna do something special because sometimes there are things going on that's bigger than basketball, and something like that is unfortunately happening right now. Which is why we're gonna dedicate normally what we use for talking about underrated players for underrated people. We're going to use this time to talk about my underrated people of the week, which is every single first responder and that's currently trying to help fight those wildfires in California. It is truly just an unfortunate event. Thoughts and prayers are with everybody who's affected by this absolute travesty, and just pray that everybody makes it out okay. So normally it's a player. This time it's a group of people. Our underrated people of the week. Just everybody being affected by what's going on in California. Hope you all stay safe. Sending thoughts and prayers your way.
I concur. I just want to pray for all the families affected. I know the concern people have for a loss of property, but think of your safety first. Think of your family's safety first, your neighbors. Your life has more value than any material thing you can ever own. And look, nothing but love and respect for the valor, just the way that the first responders are out there doing that selfless work that they do. I just hope that they can eventually get this under control and we don't lose any more people. Thoughts and prayers.
Oh, absolutely. And I figured we'd start off this week's Ball Talk, Mo, with some breaking news we actually just got today. Jared McCain is going to miss the rest of the season for the Philadelphia 76ers. Just an unfortunate stretch that we have going for Philly. Mo, what do you think about this loss and how big of an impact you think it'll have on the team?
I think it's a tremendous loss because McCain was a diamond in the rough. He had came out of nowhere, and for a period, he was playing as well as anybody, including Tyrese Maxey. So, look, it's a tough loss. You hope that the young man just gets healthy, comes back strong, because he's shown you that he can be a tremendous talent and play at a high level in the NBA. And in the bigger picture, it's a weird thing. Philly just can't. They can't get a break. They can't get right. It sometimes you know what, you have an anchor around the neck of your franchise, and I just think the anchor around the Sixers is Joel Embiid, and I think once you move on from him, the sun will be a little bit brighter, days will be a little bit better, food will taste a little bit sweeter. It's time to move on.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and like I said, it's really unfortunate too because I was really looking forward to seeing him back. He was rolling when he did play, and now that's just going to get postponed. I gotta admit too, Mo. I absolutely love what I'm seeing out of AJ Green. He looks like he made his. He got a little popular. They went against the Spurs. Giannis put on a show, of course, but a lot of people are loving AJ Green. He hit that three right in Victor Wembanyama's eye, which he decided that he was feeling it. So he took a 30-foot heat check three, nailed it. I think what we're seeing in Milwaukee is something that almost doesn't happen enough, Mo. And when the veterans aren't playing well, you push them out for the younger guys. You keep rotating in fresh legs until you find the right combination. So I want to give Doc Rivers all the credit in the world for actually making the changes that he has and, trusting the young guys. And it's paying dividends. Those young legs over in Milwaukee, super helpful. Andre Jackson Jr. might be maybe the most athletic guy in the league. That man can cover a lot of ground really quick. He's absolutely insane. I just wanted to shout out my young Bucks.
I actually think AJ Green is an underrated athlete as well, believe it or not. And what I'm most impressed about AJ Green, obviously the shooting is a given. He's actually a tremendous defender. And I don't want to put him in a box because he's young enough to where he can develop and continue to expand his game. But right now, I think AJ Green can be an elite level 3-and-D player. And I do think he's going to continue to get more minutes as the season goes on. I like the Bucks using the young guys more and getting that continuity with their veteran core. I don't normally say this, but I think Doc Rivers and his coaching staff is pressing all the right buttons. And I'm going to give credit where credit is due. I think it's unique that a Giannis-led team is kind of like an underdog this season, but in a really quiet way, I kind of think they prefer that. I kind of think Giannis is like, I'm good with that. Wait till we get to the postseason. I'm just really impressed with how the Bucks have turned their season around and how they found some diamonds in the rough on their bench, some young guys that could play. They just needed opportunity and time, and they're showing you. I've seen more from Gary Trent Jr. as well. His shot is coming alive more. I think he's going to be a bigger part of the rotation as well. So, look, I think Milwaukee is a scary team in the East that nobody's talking about. Like right now, all everybody is speaking about is the Cavaliers, the Celtics, the Knicks. Well, I'll put it out there. I think Milwaukee is going to take out one of those top three teams. I don't know which one, but I think they take out one of those and they meet one of the others in the conference finals.
I would be so down for that. Ironically, I think our best chance if we were to face any of those teams, weirdly enough, it almost feels like the Knicks. Because it's funny because on one hand, they present a very difficult matchup because Jalen Brunson is just so good and our guard defense can still be exploited at times. But at the same time, I'm so confident in watching Giannis and Brook Lopez cap the rim protector all game. That would give me absolute confidence. The one thing that going forward that I'm looking forward to too, Mo, and this is the big question mark of the day, though. The real question. Jimmy Butler. He apparently has found his team, but the Miami Heat haven't agreed yet. He wants to be in Phoenix.
Well, that ain't gonna happen. That the only way that happens is if Miami can find a third team because they don't want Bradley Beal, and I don't blame them. By the way, anybody out there that goes, well, Mo doesn't like Brad, it isn't that. It's that I don't think he's the high level player. Let me rephrase that. I don't see him as, if he's one of your two best players, you're not very good. If he's one of your three best players, you're all right. I think the best version of Bradley Beal to me, I'm talking about on a title contender, he's your fourth guy, be it as a starter or the first guy off the bench. But I just don't think he's. It's tough to say it as good as advertised. The same criticisms that people lobby at Zach LaVine, you should lobby at Bradley Beal. You know what I'm saying? They might have different skill sets, but they're very similar. I don't view either one of them in terms of their numbers as winning players, especially when they're the guy. So I get it that Jimmy wants to go there, but you and I both know Pat Riley is a very smart basketball guy. I think Pat Riley would rather get nothing than get Bradley Beal.
Yeah,
He doesn't want to inherit that contract.
Yeah, the cap space from letting Jimmy Butler walk would be better than getting Bradley Beal.
Yeah, and remember, Miami is a destination spot, so Pat Riley would probably. I would rather have the cap space to go out and pursue somebody than get Bradley Beal in return.
I think Bradley Beal, I think his biggest issue right now, and this was the same issue we talked about last year, is what he brings to the table is just redundant. Like, his big thing is scoring. He can go out and get his own bucket, but when you have Devin Booker and you have Kevin Durant, how much do you really need that guy who can go out and get a bucket? I already have two of them on the roster that can do it at the highest of levels and are insanely elite at it. Having Bradley Beal is just kind of redundant since he doesn't really offer much playmaking or defense after that. But I think the thing with the Phoenix Suns is they can trade for Jimmy Butler, but that doesn't fix anything.
Correct. Brett, if anything, if you trade for Jimmy Butler, doesn't that literally say that this season, I'm not talking about a season from now, but this season, you're saying all or bust, right? Because KD's 36. Jimmy's getting ready to turn 36. They're both only going to get older going forward. Like, and by the way, you're right. This fantasy that guys like Stephen A and other pundits have that if you add Jimmy Butler's toughness to Phoenix, if you add Jimmy Butler's toughness to Phoenix, there's still probably a first or second round exit at best. And then what do you have going into next season? Two wing players that are 36 years old. And by the way, as great as KD is, if you've been watching a lot of Suns basketball, yes, you can see signs of his age. He struggles at times. He's not a good one-on-one defender. He's a good help defender, but put KD in space against a scorer and he gets eaten alive because he has no lateral quickness. I think Phoenix has one of those types of owners who loves the splash move. So I know he would love to have Jimmy Butler, but I don't think he looks big picture. I'm actually going to go another way with this. I'm going to say it right now. If it were me, I would blow it all up. The only guy that I would keep would be Devin Booker. I would blow it up. You're not winning titles. KD, Bill, or whoever it may be will only get older. You need to make moves to where you can turn around and try to reform and build around Book. Period. If you're not going to win, I feel like I can have the same speech for the Suns. I could have the same speech for the Lakers. I could have the same speech for different reasons for the Sixers. I mean, we could keep going. But if you know you're not going to win a title, what is the point of this exercise? That's all I'm saying.
And it's funny because and that's what I don't get, right? Because every pundit's like, oh, they get Jimmy Butler, and I'm sure all of a sudden their title odds would skyrocket as soon and in Vegas. But the reality is they got such a massive hole at center that if they get Jimmy Butler, it doesn't really matter. They can pretty much pick up any forward in the game, and if they're running Yusuf Nurkic and Mason Plumlee at center in the playoffs, it's irrelevant. Give them Jimmy Butler, give them Anthony Edwards, give them whoever you want. Give them Larry Bird in his prime, and it doesn't really matter because that's just such a black hole at center with Plumlee and Nurkic that if they don't fix that, who cares?
Nurkic he's an underachiever because he's actually really talented.
Yeah, and that's like last year he was so good for them. Like I would say so good, but he was their most consistent player. I think he was really good relative to normal Nurkic standards. But this year he has just fallen off a cliff so hard.
Things are bad when Suns fans are like, man, we miss Ayton.
Right. Like Ayton on this team would be such a massive upgrade over Nurkic. At this point, they should play Oso, their third string rookie on the bench. Like it's gotten to that point that I'd almost. They just need to make a move at center. They can trade for Jimmy Butler, but if they don't make that move, I'm not moved.
Yeah, look, I don't. I think that Pat Riley he doesn't expect to get a star back for Jimmy Butler. He's realistic. Now, granted, I know some people will go, well, Bradley Beal is a star. Right. He's a star, but he's not an all-star. And he's not somebody you can build around. And he has a massive contract. I just think Pat Riley is like, for what he brings to the table, I'm not eating that contract. So I don't know if Jimmy gets to Phoenix. The only way he's going to get there if there's a third team that's like, we want Bradley Beal, which it would have to be somebody that's universally known for losing, like the Hornets or somebody of that nature. They might take him on, but I don't think there's a title contender, not playoff contender. There's not a title contender that's going to go, we're going to make a move to go get Bradley Beal. They're not. They're not.
The worst part is Beal has that no trade clause. So if you did want to dump him on that third team, you'd actually have to be like, hey, Beal, do you want to go to Charlotte? And then he'd probably just hang up the phone on you immediately.
You know he's hanging the phone up. He's going to be like, no, I'm not going to Charlotte. And look, and I'm sure Pat Riley probably told Jimmy, like, you want to find your joy, you can find it in Charlotte. You can find it in a lot of places, but you're probably not going to find it where you want to go. Jimmy uses the word joy, and he's substituting joy for the word money. That's what he's finding, because Pat Riley's not going to give him a large extension, and that's why Jimmy's lost his joy. And he's upset, but you are talking about a Pat Riley, Brett, that let LeBron, like he told LeBron, like, I'm not going to cow down to you. He let D Wade go to Chicago because he told D Wade, I'm not giving you $20 million a year at this stage of your career. And D Wade was younger than Jimmy. So if you're going to do that to two of the greatest players in the history of the franchise, Jimmy's going to get the same treatment. The one thing about Pat Riley that we can all say is the man is amazingly consistent. And all these people that are like, I thought Pat Riley was about heat culture and taking care of your players. He's not just about heat culture. I would make the point that you're missing is Pat Riley is heat culture. Pat Riley is heat culture. And we're always talking about good business. It's bad business to give a max contract to a 36-year-old wing player who doesn't even play 60 games a year, period.
Right. And I've seen a lot of people say, oh, they should pay Jimmy, like, well, what he's done in the last 4 years. The problem is, and may I remind people who think that they should just pay Jimmy, is the contract covers the next two, not the last four.
Right.
So the real question is, because this contract extension, I believe, would be like 2 years, 113 mil, 56.5 mil a year, about, give or take.
Right.
Like, the question is, I don't care what you've done for me in the last 4 years. Like, I do, but at the same time, is it really worth the money to be like, hey, 37-year-old Jimmy Butler, here's 56.5 mil? Like, I understand, right? Like, if you want to overpay somebody to say thank you by a couple mil, sure. If, the market says somebody is worth 20 and you want to give them 24 as a thank you for what they done for your franchise, okay, you know what? I can live with that. But you can't just hand out a max what Jimmy's looking for. That's the problem. He's looking for a max. And
that's it. And Brett, you hit the nail on the head. He's looking for a max for what he's done in the past. We have to judge Jimmy on the player that he is right now today, right?
Yeah.
Which we would still say, not a superstar, but all-star, right? He's still an all-star, but he's not a player you can build around. If I don't care who you are, at 36, we're not the only guy you can build around at 36. He plays in LA, and he's not 36 no more, by the way, either. But you're not going to build around a fading 36. And I'm a Jimmy Butler fan, but Pat Riley would be doing something that's like the opposite of Pat Riley. I'm going to give you money for what you did a couple of years ago, not what you're going to be going forward. Pat Riley don't get down like that. He don't. He actually told Dwayne Wade to his face. Pat Riley told Dwayne Wade 2 years, $10 million. Chicago said 2 years, $40 million. Dwayne Wade went to Chicago.
Oh, my favorite big three of all time: Wade, Pau Gasol, and Rajon Rondo. Oh, that was fantastic. But yeah, no, I think it'll be interesting because did see that Pat Riley go, yeah, we'll play Jimmy if he comes back after his suspension. I'm like, do you really want to bring Jimmy back around the team? Honestly, at this point, like, we're at a point
It's pretty ugly.
I would leave him at home.
Yeah,
I'd be like, stay home until we find a trade partner for you, or if you really don't want to be here, if you want to find it at home. We won't play you for the rest of the season. Because at some point, like, that's a very toxic situation.
Right.
And you don't want to bring that around the rest of the locker room. You don't want to bring that around your young players.
Right.
You don't want to...
Is that good for him?
Right.
Because you just suspended me for me basically voicing saying what I had to say. You think Jimmy Butler's going to come back after this suspension in the best of spirits? Like, man, I can't wait to get out there and battle real hard and go all out for this franchise that just suspended me for speaking my mind. Like, I don't see that. Like, the smart move, like you said, Brett, until we can find you a landing spot, you stay at home, man. Chill. We're going to pay you, but I'm not bringing him back. I need to focus on the guys that I'm going to battle with, Bam, Tyler Hero, all those guys. Because, look, clearly Jimmy's not part of Miami's future.
Oh, I feel like the most ironic and hilarious spot for Jimmy would be the Milwaukee Bucks.
Really?
I feel like it'd be funny just because of the whole thing with Dame last year. Or the whole thing with them sitting there trying to trade for Dame and us getting told that, well, you should just trade him where he wants to go to make him happy.
I remember that.
Yeah, no, that annoyed me, so I would laugh if we ended up with both Jimmy and Dame. Spoiler, it's not going to happen, but I just think that would be funny. No, that's exactly what I have to say to you, Heat fans, by the way. Just for that, you guys should just trade him where he wants to go. Make him happy. Come on.
Take back, find a third team, shovel. I think, like, I'm with you, Brett. I'm pretty sure if the best that he can garner in a return is cap space and maybe a couple second round picks, Riley will take that.
No, absolutely. And, we'll get into our, main event of the evening, Mo, because I feel like this is one where we just have a lot to talk about. And we're talking about the 2000s. That's a great decade. There we go. So, for anybody that's new here, thank you everybody for watching and tuning in. We've been doing all NBA decade teams that are positionless. And then not only that, we also have a defensive player of the decade for guard, forward, and center spot, and an MVP of the decade. We've covered the 1980s. Last week is the 1990s. So here we are in the year 2000. So, like I said, the point of this exercise is to create 3 All-NBA teams from the 2000s. All NBA teams will be positionless. Defensive player of the decade will be chosen, 1 guard, forward, and center, and an MVP. So, my one question, are you ready?
Oh, I'm always ready.
All right. So, first, I'd like to start off with the honorable mentions, Mo. Got Yao Ming. He's very close to making it. He was very dominant, unfortunately, before the injuries kind of took their toll on him. Chris Paul. Chris Webber. We have Tony Parker. Peja Stojakovic. Pau Gasol. And Carmelo Anthony. Which... These ones are so tough.
Yeah, because 2 names stand out, right? Initially in my head, immediately, Chris Paul and Melo. So I'm going to be interesting to see how the team shape out, when you look at those 2 guys in their careers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Chris Paul was tough for me, and so was Melo. Like, the entire list was, but those 2 were those two and Yao were very much in consideration for me to put on the third team. Chris Paul, for me, just didn't play long enough in the decade. He came in like 05 or 06.
So he's kind of like a tweener.
Yeah, he kind of popped in late, and that was kind of the challenge. Like, he was so good. He was runner-up for MVP in, I think it was 08 when Kobe won MVP.
Right.
Like, he was so good. Melo, that one was tough. And agree, disagree, let us know. Let me know in the comments. Let us know. But let's start with the All-NBA third team, which the first guy I have, Amari Stoudemire.
Stat
was an absolute problem. This is one of the few guys that would give Tim Duncan fits because of his speed and athleticism. Just an insane athlete, but he was more than an athlete. He had a great mid-range game to complement. He had some nice post moves. So I feel very comfortable with Amari Stoudemire here on the third team.
No, I'm a big fan. I think the Phoenix Suns were ahead of their time. We talk a lot about small ball in today's NBA. They were doing small ball back in 05. And Amari Stoudemire was playing center and Shawn Marion was playing power forward. And they were willing to take the mismatches on the other end because they knew on offense they had two supreme mismatches at those two positions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would have loved to seen that. I would have loved to seen that Phoenix Suns team win a ring. Absolutely. That would help some guys' legacy a ton, especially guys like Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire.
It changes immediately. I think of Nash, Stoudemire, to a lesser degree Marion, because he did get a ring later on with the Mavs. But yeah, definitely would have changed how we view Steve Nash and Stat overall.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, after this, I'm going with D12. D12, the one accolade I obviously forgot to put on here, 2009 finals appearance. Just an absolute monster. And I feel like this is the guy that kind of shows you how tough this decade is, right? Because if I have to resort to putting Dwight Howard on the third team, that's kind of wild. But overall, I'm comfortable with, D12 here. Maybe you'll disagree once you see the second team, but just...
No, I'm bugging because I feel like the Dwight Howard thing is kind of like there's an opportunity to say something really petty, but I'm not going to say it. I think I don't have a problem with you have him, man, because I think D12 was phenomenal. I know that he kind of bounced around after his time in Orlando, but you could literally call him, say he was a Hall of Famer based off of his Orlando career. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. He pretty much, he had that Hall of Fame appearance locked up before even, I would say like even before he got to Houston and LA when he was already a Hall of Famer at that point. I loved watching, especially on the defensive end. Boy, that man was a menace. The one challenge with D12, that man goaltended more shots than I've seen anybody goaltend, but he was an absolute monster on defense. Obviously, won 3 DPOYs in a row, but we're only talking about up to 09, so it only has 1 DPOY in here. So on third team, we have Dwight Howard. Which leads us to the next guy, the truth, Paul Pierce.
And his is interesting too, because isn't he like a tweener too? Like when did his draft class? It was, I want to say Pierce came out in I want to say was it the 90s? Was he right behind, a couple of years behind Kobe?
I think it was the 99.
99, yeah.
Check.
1998. There you go. I knew it was a couple of years behind after Kobe. So yeah, look, what can you say? The guy was phenomenal. Incredible offensive package, underrated athlete, big shot taker and maker earned the nickname The Truth. Paul Pierce's step back jump shot, it's one of the best. It's one of the best weapons, one of the best go-tos in NBA history. He's absolutely deserving to be on the third team.
And I think people forget. I feel like sometimes with Paul Pierce, they almost acted like his career started in 08. Not
With
realizing
Kevin Garnett, right?
Yeah,
right,
they don't realize how good this man was from, like 01 to like 07. Like he was always a super talented player, but unfortunately, early on those Celtics teams were not up to par. And when he finally got championship level teammates, he won a championship.
Facts.
No coincidence.
Well, look, I know they're really good friends and all, and Antoine Walker is, if you judge players on their talent and on potential, Antoine Walker should be a Hall of Famer. Now, if you judge him on what he actually did on the floor, he is one of the all-time greatest chuckers in the history of basketball. He is a chucker. He is. Just go back. I don't even have to look. I saw the guy play. But if you pulled up Antoine Walker's numbers right now, when he was at his peak in Boston, and looked at his numbers, you're going to see big scoring numbers. He's gonna fill out the stat sheet, but you're going to also go over to those shooting percentages and go, "Good God, good God!" Like, I dare you to go look at those shooting percentages and go, "Good, how many shots were you taking to get your scoring?" Jesus.
When people are always complaining about the shot, they'll be like, "Oh, people nowadays have bad shot selection. Shot selection back then is much better."
Right.
My first response is always, "Have you not watched Antoine Walker play basketball?"
Right.
Like any shot was a good shot for him, but except half the time it really wasn't.
Incredibly talented guy, but he had his shot selection was horrible throughout his career, and he was just a very inefficient player.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, we got to follow this up with Ray Allen.
One of my favorite players of all time.
This is another guy that, everybody talks about him as part of the 08 championship Celtics team. Rightfully so. He was very good then. I picked a picture of him in the Seattle Supersonics jersey, by the way, because it's too painful to think he was a member of the Bucks, and we chose George Karl over him just for George Karl to leave in that offseason anyway.
Why would you do that?
We were pretty terrible at this whole front office thing then. Trading him for Gary Payton for 18 games was not a good time for Bucks fans. And the thing is, initially, I remember when the trade went down, I thought, okay, I still think Allen, because he's younger and still hadn't even hit his peak. Why would you do that? And then they bring in Gary Payton, who was still playing at a high level, but you could tell immediately Gary Payton had no interest in being in Milwaukee. If I remember correctly, because they were together before, he had beef with George Karl, who was the coach.
Right.
I'm like,
right.
Why even bring him in? Like,
isn't that funny? That's funny. That's true.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, everybody thinks of Ray Allen, the sniper, but Mo, you can attest to this. He wasn't always just the sniper. That man was very athletic in his prime. Very high. He could dunk. He could throw down. 3-level scorer.
And he could take you off the dribble. Like, I get a lot of people got to see Celtics Ray Allen, who was more of a catch and shoot guy, but Jesus Shuttleworth, that Ray Allen, the kid that was on the Bucks / the Sonics, could take you off the dribble and would dunk on your head. Like, that Ray Allen was explosive. He's so underrated. It's one of those conversations that I have that drives me crazy. That's maddening because I don't like to feel like I'm putting down other greats, but when people go Reggie Miller was better than Ray Allen, that annoys me. And I like Reggie Miller. Please trust me when I say I'm a Reggie Miller fan, but he just out and out wasn't a better player than Ray Allen.
No, that's absolutely fair enough. And of course, this one might be controversial to some because this man was hampered by injuries. But when he did play, oh my gosh, he was amazing. I'm taking Tracy McGrady. His peak was just absolutely insane. This is a guy that, quite frankly, if he could have stayed healthy his entire career, we're talking about a top 3 shooting guard of all time. He's right up there in the Kobe and Wade conversations if he stays healthy. That's how much faith that I have in the talent of Tracy McGrady.
So I agree with everything you just said, but it's because in reality he didn't stay healthy and he was hurt most of the decade. That what he could have been, I'm just talking about for me, what he could have been, it can't overshadow what Chris Paul was. Like, if you can tell me who's more explosive and stuff, but Chris Paul was a better player through the 2000s than Tracy McGrady was. Tracy McGrady was in and out of the lineups most of his career. Like, I don't even know if you could say Tracy McGrady was better than Melo. Like that, he's the first person we mentioned where we're talking about his talent and what we knew he could be when he was healthy, but the problem was he didn't spend a lot of time being healthy.
No, that's fair. I figured this would be the one, if anything, to get the pushback on.
Right, because McGrady kind of in the same book ultimately as Yao Ming. What held Yao back was not that Yao couldn't rock with anybody; it was that he stayed hurt.
No, that's absolutely fair enough. That's fair enough. At the end of the day, it's tough because he did have a pretty decent stretch of playing at a high level in the 2000s.
No doubt.
We're talking about he was 5-time, 2-time All-NBA first team, 3-time second team, 2-time third team. That's 7 All-NBAs he racked up in the 2000s. So I agree that, what he could have been, you can make an argument for Melo, but at the end of the day with T-Mac, he was hurt, but he stayed healthy long enough, I think, to really make it here. This having 7 All-NBA teams definitely, I think, helps his cause. I wouldn't be mad if somebody pushed back and said Melo or Chris Paul. I wouldn't be mad.
No, I think T-Mac gave you pace.
I think T-Mac gave you 7 good years there. And, I would say 7 really elite to really good years. And to me, that was enough to kind of push him onto this list for me. And plus, he has one of the more insane peaks, as we've seen too, when it came to T-Mac.
He does. But and I agree. So when I look at stuff like that, I don't have a problem with him being ahead of Melo, because ultimately I'm looking at not just your production, but I'm also looking at what you did in terms of your team success. And I would say that early in his career, Chris Paul was the best. Actually, he was the best player on his career with the Hornets. He was the best player on the Clippers. Blake Griffin was fun to watch, and he was a highlight reel, but he was a highlight reel because he was catching lobs from Chris Paul. But Chris Paul was the best player on the Clippers. I would say that Chris Paul was a better player than Tracy McGrady. I guess you could say because he's kind of a tweener in where he starts, because Chris Paul's probably going to have a shot to be I guess on the 2010 team too, or maybe somewhere in there, because he's a tweener.
Chris Paul for sure is going to be on the 2010 team, and that's really why I didn't put Chris Paul over T-Mac, because that was a real discussion that I was thinking of. But considering Chris Paul got his start really late in the decade, I'm talking 05 draft.
Right.
So he only played 4 years. That was kind of the deciding factor. Those 4 years were insane, including a runner-up MVP to Kobe.
They were. Fair enough.
But that's kind of why I didn't have Chris Paul in here. I'm like, if I couldn't put Timmy in for the 90s because he only played 3 years, can I really put Chris Paul in here for the 2000s because he only played 4?
And to be fair, we both agreed, but we also agreed Timmy had a case. Now, he didn't get in, but goddamn, them first 3 years. I'm just saying, the man did was when he won a championship. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. Hey, I was this close to adding Chris Paul in. Chris Paul and Carmelo were this close to getting in.
Yeah, Chris Paul is just a monster. So I get it. Like I said, I feel because he's a tweener, he's more of a lock to be in the 2010s. But yeah, I got you.
Oh yeah, no, you'll definitely see him in those 2010s. But how do we talk about the All-NBA second team? And the first name I got here is Dirk Nowitzki.
I love Dirk.
And this just shows how talented the 2000s was, right? Because in most decades, Dirk is a first teamer. And you can almost argue that maybe you could find a spot for him on the first team for this one. Like when we get there, maybe you go, hey, Dirk should be in over this guy. But I have Dirk Nowitzki on the All NBA 2002 team. We all know 2007 MVP. He made that finals appearance in 06, only to be thwarted by Dwayne Wade's 96 free throws in 6 games. Just an absolutely absurd player and really a ground-breaking player who set the blueprint for years to come, right? There are no real stretch, like we had stretch bigs before, but none of them on the level of Dirk. Dirk took the stretch big to the next level. And guys like Karl Anthony Towns that you see now, that pretty much that starts mostly with Dirk.
No, I agree. It's funny because I remember when Porzingis came out, and the first thing, I think it was Durant that said he's a unicorn, and the first thing I thought of was I was like, no, you're a unicorn. He's pretty good, and he might be that, but in which he obviously didn't turn out to be that. But Dirk was a unicorn. 6'9", 6'10", could shoot from anywhere on the floor, had a post game, had a mid-range game, could put it on the floor and get to the rim, could get to the free throw line. I think when we talk about what makes a franchise player, it isn't that you're just an elite in numbers, but it's that you elevate your teammates. Dirk was good enough to take 2 teams to the finals, but when he was the man, those Mavericks teams were in contention multiple times. Like you pointed out, he probably should be a 2-time champion, but it's kind of weird. It's a karma thing. Thanks to his owner, Mark Cuban, and the competition committee, Dwayne Wade shot 733 free throws and they beat him. And by the way, this is not me saying that Dwayne Wade didn't go crazy and wasn't the best player the last 4 games of that series, because he was. But I just think sometimes when we talk about guys that get lost in the shuffle, Dirk, it feels to me, Brett, like Dirk didn't retire that long ago, but we don't appreciate him enough.
No, absolutely. Like I've always said that Dirk is one of my favorite players of all time. One of the first jerseys I actually got was a Dirk Nowitzki jersey. I still have it.
Wow.
So overall, I love.
Which is weird, by the way, because you're a Bucks fan and y'all traded Dirk on draft night for Tractor Trailer.
Oh, yeah. I'm not proud of our trades half the time. They're pretty terrible.
Your GM must have been like, yeah, Dirk's nice, but that Tractor Trailer, man, look at that body, look at that size. Okay.
I don't trust the Bucks to make trades. I can only think of 2 that I remember working out very well for us, and that's trading with the Houston Rockets for PJ Tucker. That worked out really well for us.
That was a good move.
2015 Brandon Knight, Michael Carter Williams trade, where the throw-in just happened to be Chris Middleton. That one worked out for us, but other than that, we are really terrible at trades half the time.
Didn't y'all trade for Drew?
Drew Holiday, that's the third one. Yeah,
that's a good one. I mean, Drew, that worked out pretty good for a little.
Yeah, while. That did. I somehow that slipped my mind somehow. So I think I'm just getting old. Memories starting to go on me.
if you're getting old, I'm in trouble. I'm
saying this guy, easy for me. He got Jason Kidd. He as much as we can say about him being an offensive force, which he was very good at, getting downhill and getting to the basket, we're talking about one of the greatest guard defenders of all time. When it comes to 2-way guard play, I think in the 2000s, you could argue he was the standard. He was just insanely good on both ends of the court. His rim pressure he generated, he was really good at driving and spraying it out to open shooters. And, it wasn't until later in his career he developed that 3-ball, but
right.
Even without it, he was just so disruptive and so impactful. I had no problem putting him here.
I'm one of the biggest Jason Kidd fans in the world, and maybe there's a connection there because Magic is my favorite player of all time. I think that it says something about guys who can be dominant, who can control games and average 10 or 12 points a game, but be the best player on the floor. Jason Kidd was that guy. Like, again, the same thing that I just talked about with Dirk, to be able to be the best player, to dominate he dominated his conference for the better part of 3 years and went to 2 finals in a row. And I was blown away by that. Like I said, I thought he should have had more consideration for MVP those 2 seasons. I thought he should have got the same love for MVP that Steve Nash got.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that the New Jersey Nets made it to back-to-back finals is kind of a testament to the greatness of Kidd. I'm not going to say they didn't have anybody on that team, but
did.
You watch the Nets, it was just clear who's the engine of that team. It was very clear right from the jump that they had talent, but Jason Kidd really brought it all together.
Right, and that's what I want to remind people. Like, they did have talent, but Keith Van Horn was a really good player. Young Richard Jefferson was really good and athletic. Kerry Kittles, like they had a lot of really good players. But the superstar, the guy, that was Jason Kidd.
No, absolutely. And then next I have, speaking of Steve Nash, just an absolutely phenomenal player. When we're talking about Steve Nash, we're talking about a guy who didn't know how to have a bad offense. He went to Phoenix under, D'Antoni. They were the perfect couple. And he proceeded to rip off 8 straight years of top 2 offenses. In the 1 year, we've said this before, say it again. The 1 year he didn't have a top 1 offense was when Amari Stoudemire was hurt. He subbed him in for Boris Diaw and Lindsey Hunter. Still a top 2 offense. This is a guy whose impact on offense was amazing. He's one of the greatest shooters of all time.
Easily.
That man was hot from everywhere. And I think this man gets so disrespected and underappreciated just because of the MVPs. He's the only guy I've seen where MVPs might do more damage to his legacy than help it.
It's really weird because he gets degraded and disrespected because guys with bigger names, maybe bigger fan bases or fanboys, talk about how their guy didn't win a title or win a MVP. I'm sorry. Look, I have no problem when you're listening to a lifelong Laker fan when anybody that says that, maybe Kobe should have won that MVP, right? And I'm talking about Steve Nash's first MVP, but his second MVP with Noah Amari and what they did and how, remember, the second MVP came with Amari being out for the season, with Joe Johnson having gone to the Hawks. They lost Joe Johnson, they lost Q Richardson. Like they literally replaced them with Boris Diaw and Raja Bell and didn't miss a beat because of Steve Nash. He earned that MVP. And anybody that thinks Shaquille O'Neal should have been MVP with 22 and 9, and he wasn't the leading scorer on his team. He wasn't the lead assist guy on his team. He barely led them in rebounds with 9 rebounds. That was not an MVP. I get it. He was older and you wanted to show respect to Shaq. You can show respect to Shaq, but he was not an MVP. Steve Nash was the best player on the team with a better record, point blank.
It's funny because Steve Nash's offensive dominance there of 1 and 2s came to an end almost when Shaq came to the Suns. He forced them to completely slow the game down, which is the exact opposite of what Nash and them wanted to do.
Ruined the Suns, who I can't remember who their GM was at the time. He had done everything right, and then he brought in Shaq. Is when he started doing everything wrong, because not only did Shaq slow them down, he clogged the paint. Having Shaq on the floor with Amari Stoudemire, it stunted what Amari Stoudemire did best. I never got that trade at all. It didn't make sense. And they knew they were wrong because he was only there for that year.
It's funny because I've seen people try to defend it they tried to bring him down to slow down, Tim Duncan because Duncan ate Amari alive on offense. I'm like, okay, but now putting Shaq in the paint also lets Tim Duncan stay in the paint. and you're literally allowing one of the greatest rim protectors to just camp in the paint against you. So,
And remember, this is older, slow. Like the younger Shaq couldn't. He really couldn't guard Tim Duncan himself. So older, slower Shaq is gonna guard prime Tim Duncan. That's not how that works.
yeah, and that's the thing with Shaq. He wasn't ever necessarily the greatest defender.
He was not.
So it's like we're bringing him in to be our defensive guy. Like, oh boy, here we go. But
I see you all the time, kind of like you rant a little bit about drop coverage because you hate it. Well, if you played with Shaquille O'Neal and they put you in a pick and roll, guess what was happening?
drop coverage.
You were playing drop coverage, and the other team was getting whatever shot they wanted because Shaq couldn't play in space.
I don't dislike drop coverage, but I don't love it either. It really depends on the team composition and who your point of attack defenders are. Like, I think when the Bucks do it with Brook Lopez, it was fine when we had like Drew Holiday and he could fight through every single screen. But if I'm asking the Phoenix Suns to do it and Steve Nash is running point, who's not going to fight through that screen,
he is not.
Then I think it's pretty terrible. So I'm not against drop coverage, but I also think you shouldn't do it unless you have the right team composition, and that includes the right guards to just navigate screens and defend the ball handler. And the Suns just did not have that.
So what you're saying is, what Shaquille O'Neal needed, he needed Jason Kidd, who did play for the Suns. He needed Jason Kidd instead of Steve Nash because Jason Kidd would have blasted through screens and he would have been on top of the ball handler, which I still think the Spurs win that series, by the way, anyway. But yeah, I get it. Look, in the bigger picture, the point you and I are both making is Shaq was a liability for Phoenix. He hurt their offense and their defense.
No, absolutely. But yeah, I'd say at the end of the day, second team Steve Nash. It's so weird to say. I feel like he should be first team, but
no, somebody would say blasphemy. First team. By the way, here I just remembered something. So here's the crazy part: Steve Nash is a two-time MVP. Has done everything you can do in the NBA outside, obviously, of win a title. But you and I both know some of the greatest players to ever do it haven't won titles. This is where somebody's going to go. You put Steve Nash ahead of Chris Paul. And so my reply, and I don't know if this is your response, would be, well, yeah, because he won 2 MVPs back to back. And he was the best player in one of the most dominant teams, at least for like a three. They were relevant for like a 4 or 5 year stretch while he was there. Because I remember the last time they were really good, they lost to Kobe and company, I think 07-08 in 6 games. I have no problem putting Steve Nash ahead of Chris Paul because, again, you laid out the groundwork. Chris Paul came into the decade late and didn't do nearly as much as Steve Nash did. Point blank.
Yeah, I'd say, and at the end of that, he came in the 05 draft.
Right.
Came in Darren Williams.
Oh, by the way,
that's 4 years for Chris Paul, and that's kind of what killed Chris Paul for me. It's like, I wanted it, but it's like, he only played for 4 years. I don't know how much I can really throw him on here.
No, I like that. See, this is the thing that makes these lists great, is that we're not just going, well, he was a better. I'm not talking about career. We're talking about what you did in the decade, and the decade is from 2000 to 09, correct? And you have to remember, I think Nash came in the late. I think he was part of that 96 class also. Mm-hmm. So you got the best. Like, Steve Nash was actually a really good basketball player, but we don't talk about this a lot. But he was really good when he was with Dallas and he was with Dirk. The only difference was when he went to Phoenix, D'Antoni literally built the offense around him, and he was the guy.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is pace. Steve Nash was much better in a very fast and up-tempo system. Dallas, he was still very good, but if you're playing with Dirk, you're playing in a more slower, post-centric system, and that, as much as Steve Nash did it well, that wasn't going to fully unlock Steve Nash, and I'm so glad that him and D'Antoni were able to finally get together in Phoenix, and we got to see what Steve Nash really looked like. And of course, this one feels weird. Second team, Dwayne Wade. We all know how dominant this guy was, as we mentioned. 2006 Finals MVP, champion, clear best player on that team. What can we say about Dwayne Wade that just kind of hasn't been said already? I think the only thing missing on here is you could argue that he should have an MVP. Just an insane talent, one of the best slashers in NBA history. And also, he'd compete his butt off on the defensive end. One of the great playmakers on the defensive end, too. He's very pesky, like to get into those passing lanes. And of course, as we alluded to before, one of the best free throw drawers that the game has ever seen.
He was.
When we start talking about guys who would embellish calls to get to the line, you could argue that you started to see a lot of that with Dwayne Wade. That man lived at the line when he wanted to.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't think he's as clever as a Ginobili or a Harden or a Trae Young. I really thought Wade got to the line most of the time because he had such an amazing first step. I would actually say first and second step, that he was one of those kind of athletes that if he got by you, he was on top of that next defender before they could react, and he's dunking on them. Like, not just a great slasher, but one of the great rim finishers in NBA history. And you pointed out defensively, terrific in the passing lane, but also as a guard, a great shot blocker from the weak side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Dwayne Wade has one of my favorite final series of all time. It's funny, or not final series, playoff series. And it's funny because you don't say this often about a team that got like smoked in 5 games, like the Heat did to the Celtics in 2009. But man, Wade dropping 34 against the championship Celtics in a playoff series was absolutely special. At the end of the day, it's just a fantastic all-around player on the defensive end, the offensive end. His biggest weakness is jumper. He made up for that in more than one way. And just over the course of his career, his jumper just kept improving. And one of my favorite Wade moments of all time will be that Anderson Varejao poster.
Oh God, yeah. He made Varejao famous on that one. Yeah, that's one of my favorite Wade dunks. I'm trying to think if I have a Wade dunk that I like. He has so many monster finishes. Just an amazing talent, amazing competitor, relentless. That step back later in his career, it became patented as he got older. I have nothing but superlatives to say about D Wade because people forget. Again, we alluded to this, but he was an all NBA defender 3 times. So don't sleep on the guy. Like, he competed on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this next one's probably going to be a little controversial, but you know what? I live for controversy. Okay, so
Al Horford. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, he was winning titles with the Florida Gators teams in the 2000s. Him and Shaquille Noah back to back.
Yeah, yes, I'm always joking, but he's actually one of my favorite players.
But they knocked out Greg Oden in the final. I remember that.
Who was on that team? Do you remember? Jakeem Noah, Al Horford. I remember Corey Brewer.
I think
was Mike. No, it wasn't Mike Miller, was it? It was Corey Brewer. Who were the other guys? It's on the tip of my tongue. Oh man, I cannot remember the rest of the starting 5. But they were just nice across the board.
Why did I think that they had Corey Brewer, Mo Spates. I forgot he was there.
That's it. Mo Spates was on that squad too. Dang.
Let's see, who's? Yeah, no, that's wild. But the controversy, Mo, might be right here. Allen Iverson. And I think this one you could argue either way. I think that means you know who I put on the first team, and this is where you can make the argument.
Okay.
In the 2000s, I'll even spoil the next one for you: Allen Iverson or LeBron James. In the 2000s, overall, Allen Iverson was fantastic for the Philadelphia 76ers. Overall, if you want to know what kind of held them back to the second team over the first for me, if I erase, I actually put Philadelphia Eagles. I was thinking about, I have a playoff game against them this weekend.
You
meant
can't get
76ers
Packers in your mind. I got
Yep.
you.
It's really this stretch right here because I can't erase that it happened. And this is kind of what dropped them a little for me. It's like, as much as I want to, I can't erase that Denver happened. Detroit did happen. Overall, his his 76ers peak run was insane. Obviously, 2001 AI was absolutely special. People talk about him just being a volume shooter, and I don't think that people understand how challenging it is to shoot the ball 30 times a game. And the reality is that's what the 76ers wanted him to do. They built the offense for Allen Iverson to score.
Thank you. They built that team that way. They surrounded him with a bunch of overachievers and defenders, and his goons had goons. The only other guy on that team that was a scorer to some degree was Aaron McKee, and he was a sixth man. I think that we forget that Allen Iverson, another guy, you know what? Maybe that draft class is the greatest draft class. Another guy from the 96 draft class. He stepped into the NBA, Brett, as a rookie and immediately had not just an impact on the floor, but he had a cultural impact. He had a style impact. He was the guy that drew people into wearing the baggy shorts. The cornrows came into play, the arm sleeves. That was AI. I don't think it's controversial. The only way it's controversial is if you say that you think he might be on the first team, but he's absolutely at a minimum on the second team. And I would say that depending on who you have on the first team, he might get some love there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And why don't I go ahead and, since I already talked about this, got LeBron James. I think people forget just how much of a demon young LeBron was. When we talk about the best version of LeBron James, we talk 2013 LeBron, 2015, 16, 17, 18, whatever version you want from the, 2010s. But I think people sleep on just how good 2009 LeBron was. That is arguably like the most athletic we've seen LeBron. And obviously we knew he was special. This is a guy who decided to call game on the Pistons by scoring 27 in a row on them in the playoffs, which was absolutely unheard of to do to Detroit.
It's one of the most amazing performances I've ever seen. To watch that as it's happening was amazing.
Yeah, so this was tough, but I thought he gave from the 03 to 2009 he gave a 6. Even coming in as a rookie. He started out, as a really very good, I would say, rookie year. You're talking about LeBron James just being like an all-star caliber player. But then he just quickly jumps up to being elite just so quickly. And for the better half of the decade, or at least half the decade, we're looking at elite level basketball where he's winning MVPs. If we're talking, I know in 07, he takes the Cavaliers to the finals, which that team had talent on there. Don't get me wrong. I think I'm a very big proponent is you need to have talent to make it to the NBA finals. So I will never say somebody single-handedly carried, but also at the same time, that might have been the closest thing to a carry job you've had.
Yeah. I'm going to say, here's the thing that we always give Iverson credit for, right? We give Iverson credit for taking a team that had no scores. No, there was no offensive talent on that team, correct? And we say, well, Iverson carried a bunch of guys to the finals. But you pointed out what a lot of people don't want to acknowledge, Larry Brown literally built that team to be defenders. Larry Brown wanted Allen Iverson to dominate games and be the closer and have them other guys get after you defensively, correct? I think LeBron, his carry job is more impressive than Iverson's carry job, in my opinion. Like, yes, the Cavs had some talent, but nobody, at least nobody that I knew, thought that those Cavs could beat those Pistons in a series.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the fact they got as far as they did, making it all the way to the finals, and it's funny because I don't understand why people hold finals losses against players, but they'll be like, oh, LeBron didn't shoot very well, but also, like, look, he was going up against the dynasty Spurs who focused solely on defense. They would send multiple guys at LeBron every time, force somebody else to beat you. And even when they left LeBron on an island for the rare times that they did, you're dealing with who? Oh, yeah, Bruce Bowen, one of the great perimeter defenders of the 2000s. So
He is. He is.
Overall, just I think the big reason I put LeBron over AI is I think they were both special in the 2000s, but I think LeBron did exactly what AI did in 01, in 07.
Right.
And then he continued to peak higher and higher than what AI did.
That's a great point. He matched him in 07, but he was better in 08. And even he was insanely, he was a monster in 09, right? Like, the only thing he didn't do right in 09 was get to the finals. But even when he lost that series in the conference finals to Orlando, I don't know the exact numbers, you probably do, but I think he had an insane stat line like 35-8. It was something crazy where you were like, they didn't lose because of him.
Yeah, last time I looked, and it was like he went for 38 against the Orlando Magic. And we can talk about the series. Right? The reality is the bigger problem is they didn't have any bigs for Dwight Howard, which kind of collapsed the defense, and the Cavaliers shooters went cold at the same time. So overall, just let's see. Yeah, no. Overall, just an insane series and just an insane 2000s for Bron. So
yeah, so I don't even think that's the controversy. So I think that if there's somebody else that's lesser, that might be more the controversy with Iverson. LeBron is not the controversy. Like, if you tell me LeBron's first team, me and you are on the same page, because I'm like, I love AI, but he's not knocking LeBron off the first team.
No, that's fair. I remember saying before, because I was like, man, is this? Because I remember saying, I didn't know if it was fair to put him here because I didn't put MJ on the first team in the 80s, but then also in the 80s, like, it was down to him and Isaiah Thomas, and Isaiah Thomas also gave you like a full fantastic decade, or
And
pretty close to it. He won a title. He went back to back, and
right.
But
right.
Why don't we go over to the big ticket? Kevin Garnett.
The kid.
KG. Just think Minnesota could add something special, but they threw it all away for Joe Smith. Very unfortunate. The first time Kevin Garnett got a halfway decent supporting cast, they go to the Western Conference Finals. He's MVP. We talk about Boston KG, threw up a Boston KG picture, but Mo, you got to see this man live in 04 during his MVP season.
I watched him from the beginning. He was absolutely amazing because he was the first guy. I think if Kevin Garnett's not 7 feet tall, he must be like 6'11" and then some, right? Like, but Brett, the man had a 16 to 18 foot jump shot. I think for most of his career with the Timberwolves, he averaged over 4 assists a game. It was a playmaker. And when we talk about elite defenders, I think Kevin Garnett is in the conversation for when we say put together the greatest defensive team in the history of basketball. If he's not on it, then something's wrong with your team.
I actually think he's a top 4 defender of all time.
I'm not arguing.
I think that once it comes back down to where you really have Bill Russell, but I always include him in that top 4. So I got Russell, Hakeem, and then you got KG and Duncan to me. Those 4.
I'm not moving nobody out that list. I'm not moving nobody off that list.
Yeah, Kevin Garnett, just absolutely. It's funny because people like to compare him and Tim Duncan on defense and try to figure out who's the better defender. And I almost want to say it depends what you prefer, right?
Yeah.
Because if you need a more like traditional rim protector,
it's Duncan.
It's Duncan. But Kevin Garnett was just so fast and agile. He can move in space with guards. He almost is like the blueprint of what a small ball 5 could be. Like an actual elite, true small ball 5. And he is just he was just insane on both ends. Lateral quickness off the chart, amazing hands, IQ.
I believe the Lakers beat the Timberwolves, if I'm correct. I think that was a 6-game series. And it was a 6-game series. One of the big reasons why is because we didn't have anybody that could guard Kevin Garnett. And we tried our forwards, and then we tried Shaq, but he would just feed Shaq jump shot sandwiches because Shaq's only going to come out so far, and KG was just eating him alive. So it was a great series. It was a better series than people remember, because you forget that Garnett was dominant, but he had some good help from, I believe it was Sam Cassell, Latrell Sprewell. Like they had some good players. Like you said, the first time they gave him a good team, he goes to the Western Conference Finals. Like Kevin Garnett's one of my favorite players. Like I know a lot of people remember Boston KG, and that guy was a tremendous player and a leader, but he's nowhere near as good as the kid that played in Minnesota.
Yeah, same. You can argue that the only thing that stopped the Lakers and Celtics from facing each other 3 times in the finals, 2009, Kevin Garnett gets hurt.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, people will remember Paul Pierce as finals MVP, but the true best player on the Celtics was Kevin Garnett.
No, I'm not arguing that. He not only disrupted the Lakers offense, he found a way to do something that's very rare. He locked down Paul Gasol, and he took Lamar Odom out of that. Like he took 2 stars. Like I don't know how many people do that, but he took 2 stars out of that series. Like that's how dominant he was defensively. Like he outplayed I thought he outplayed and dominated Gasol, but I thought he outplayed and mentally getting Lamar Odom. Like you won't remember this. You probably can look it up on YouTube. Lamar Odom got so frustrated one time with Kevin Garnett, he literally ran at him and tried to tackle him.
That's one thing too with Kevin Garnett is mind games 101. He is always trash talking you, trying to get in your head, and yeah, there's a lot of guys that absolutely worked on, but one guy it did not work on. Tim Duncan. Nothing you could say to Tim Duncan would bother this man. Just an absolutely insane talent.
Stoic.
Yeah, he 3-time NBA champion in the decade.
He is not just one of my favorite players. He is, when people talk about the all-time greats, with no hesitation, I'm like, if Tim Duncan's not 5, he's 6, right? Like he's right there. He's right there. What didn't he do? 5 titles. I believe he won the regular season MVP 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
How many times did he win it? Twice or 3 times?
2 times.
And he's got like 3 finals MVPs, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean,
90, I think it was 99, 03, and 07. He was
right.
Finals MVP.
He is the total package, and no, he's not as agile or as quick as KG was, but he was as efficient. And the thing about him is the same way people say you can't speed up Paul Pierce or speed up Luka in today's game, you couldn't speed Timmy up. He played at his own pace. You were at his mercy. He can face you up. That banker was money off the glass. He had a jump hook. He had a running hook. He had great footwork with the step through, could finish with both hands around the basket, elite rim protector, super high basketball IQ. If you're going to build, if we say, let's do a draft of franchise players you would build around, Tim Duncan would be one of my first guys.
Yeah, and I know the argument that people try to use against Tim Duncan, he had such great players, he had pop. But I think what people miss with these dynasties is you need that bedrock to the foundation, right? You need something to build off of it. For the Celtics, it was Larry Bird. For the Bulls, it was MJ. And the Spurs, it was Tim Duncan.
Yeah.
No, the Spurs aren't a dynasty without Tim Duncan. You can still give them Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard. But without Tim Duncan, like, do they win a title? Probably not.
No.
And that's the reality. Like, his defense and his just leadership was just absolutely next level. And you need that strong foundation to build the dynasty. And there are no San Antonio Spurs without Tim Duncan.
Facts. Remember that story that somebody told that Tim Duncan was so close when he was a free agent to signing with Orlando. Remember this, he was going to team up with T-Mac and Grant Hill in Orlando, right? And your guy, Doc Rivers, blew it because I think Timmy wanted to fly with his family, and Doc was like, we're not going to pay for that or whatever. And that was it. That turned off Tim Duncan. Doc strikes again. Look, if Tim Duncan doesn't stay in San Antonio and he goes to Orlando, I'm more than confident that Orlando would have won a title or two.
No, absolutely. And, I'm sure we can guess the last guy on this All-NBA first team. It is indeed Shaquille O'Neal. Actually, never mind. There's two more. I lied. I kind of forgot I needed five.
I know the last guy is. Yeah.
Yeah, we all know it's Kwame Brown. No need to. This guy, what can we say? You got to witness this dominance up close and personal. I purposely picked this picture to bring back some good memories. The alley-oop against the Blazers.
That is the signature play.
2000 Shaq was, well, if we made a list of the greatest individual seasons of all time, 2000 Shaq might just win the whole thing. He was that dominant.
Yeah, I'm not arguing. If you factor in his regular season and his playoff run, yeah, I can see 2000 Shaq being number one on that list. That Shaquille O'Neal is the best version of Shaquille. Like the Orlando Shaquille O'Neal is the younger, it is the quicker, more athletic Shaquille O'Neal. But the Lakers Shaquille O'Neal was when he had the combination of still being incredibly athletic, but he was more skilled. He had a drop step. He had a couple of go-to moves. That was the more polished Shaquille O'Neal. That is the best Shaquille O'Neal. I get to watch him, and I know he used to always say he made free throws when it mattered most. All I know is the Lakers three-peated, so in my opinion, he made enough. He made enough. He was so dominant, he literally would collapse your defense, get your team in the penalty in the first quarter. Like, and that had a bearing on the game late in games when you played the Lakers. You'd already be in the penalty, and then they get the ball to Kobe, and Kobe's a killer, and he's shooting free throws, closing the game out. Like, Shaquille O'Neal's 3-year run with the Lakers, I'm not here to argue with anybody. Anybody that tells me that 3-year run is the most dominant 3-year run, I'm not going to argue with you.
And, a lot can be made about Shaq's defense. Individually, he wasn't the greatest defender we've ever seen. But he's one of those guys that his defense was his offense.
There it is.
His defense was, he's going to put you in foul trouble. So now, guess what? Your star defensive center? Yeah, he's out of the game. Here comes, let me throw a random name out there. Greg Ostertag's in the game now. Somebody a lot more unskilled.
There you go. I thought you were going to say Scott Pollard, but yeah, that's good too.
That's the defense. That's Shaq's best defense. He forced entire teams to just put 4 or 5 guys at the end of their bench. What were they there for? Foul Shaq. Foul Shaq. Keep the stars out of foul trouble.
That was the strategy. What was the line? Hack a Shaq. Wasn't that a strategy?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very rare to see somebody that could actually bang with the big guy. The only two that I remember seeing off the top of my head really just Divac and Sabonis.
Yeah. And I would say more Sabonis than what Divac was really good at doing.
Flopping.
Was snapping his head back, taking fake jabs. He was great at taking fake jabs.
He very much flustered Shaq because he would always just try to just draw fouls, it seemed.
Right.
But, of course, a fellow Laker rounding out the list. I didn't know which number to put, 24 or 8, because they're both Hall of Fame careers, which is insane. So I just put both. He is the Mamba himself, Kobe Bryant. So
amazing player. Kobe, my favorite version of Kobe is number 8. I don't know why I'm drawn more to I think number 8 was more my favorite because number 8 stayed in attack mode. Number 8 attacked the rim consistently. Like I think 24 attacked you with his footwork, but he lived more on the perimeter. 8 lived at the rim.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can't say enough great things about just Kobe, just a true competitor on both sides of the ball. He was absolutely relentless in how he attacked you. And once again, he's not only did we all know that he was also a great trash talker. He'd get in your head. The man learned French just so he can trash talk Tony Parker is still one of the greatest things I've ever heard to this day. Overall, just the ultimate competitor. No matter what situation you put him in, he was always going to compete.
Ultimate competitor, maybe the greatest work ethic of any superstar that ever played. You can tell me there are some great stars who work as hard. You're not going to tell me that there's not a star that's ever played the game of basketball, including Michael Jordan and LeBron James, that worked harder at his craft than Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, the DPOYs of the decade. Who did I throw in here? Well, here are my selections. At guard, I got Jason Kidd. I think it came down to him and Kobe. But maybe it was just, I always thought Jason Kidd was a slightly better defender than Kobe. I think they were both elite. Forward, I think this one's easy. Tim Duncan. Center, that was a lot tougher. But for me, it came down to Ben Wallace and D12. Had to give the nod to Ben Wallace for this decade.
I'm good with that on 2 fronts. One, because Ben Wallace won DPOY 4 times. Mm-hmm. And Ben Wallace, he wasn't the head of the offense, but he was the heart and soul of that defense. That was one of the most dominant defenses in NBA history. I have no problem with Ben Wallace being part of this trio. Tim Duncan's easy. I think, yes, you can certainly make a case for Kobe, but I have no problems with Jason Kidd because I think Jason Kidd was every bit as elite as Kobe was defensively. And what people don't remember about J. Kidd was he didn't just guard point guards. Jason Kidd, 6'4", 6'5". He was an elite at getting into 2 guards and shutting them down too. So I think Jason Kidd is a great choice. I love all 3 of these guys being on here. I think they're all deserving.
Yeah, say that, and that was the thing that people I think forget just how 6'5", and also just how stocky and built Jason Kidd was.
Right, he was a rock. He
was one of those few that he could keep up with your quicker guards, but also you can't back him down because he's probably stronger than a lot of the people trying to back him down too.
Right, insanely strong. They always say that Jason Kidd has some of the strongest hands in NBA history. Like, there's the thing that point guards are taught to do with big men, that every time the ball goes into the post, you got to be able to dig down. I don't know. They're the only guards I thought that did it almost as well as Jason Kidd, I would say, would be Gary Payton and Chris Paul, and still Jason Kidd was the best at it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, when I talk about the best defensive guards of all time, J. Kidd's always in the conversation for me. Of course, Timmy, how he never won a DPOY is still the most mind-blowing thing to me.
It is insane because of some of the people that have won one.
Right. Like, to me, he's like the example of when people try to use this player has this award and this player doesn't, so he's better. I'm like, okay, but Tim Duncan doesn't have a DPOY, and I promise you he's a better defender than 99% of people that do have a DPOY.
Right. I agree.
And of course, the MVP of the decade. Who was the MVP of the 2000s? Who did I pick? Or who did we pick? I went with Kobe. Now, I want to start here, Mo, because I know we talked about how dominant Shaq was in the early 2000s. And I think what people miss is just how vital Kobe was to Shaq to kind of help him dominate in the early 2000s.
Facts.
Shaq opened up a lot for Kobe. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say he didn't. But I see a lot of people try to downplay that. Let's not act like Kobe didn't open up a lot for Shaq as well. Kobe's shot making was absolutely vital to that Lakers team. He was also a very dominant force. This wasn't just Shaq carried Kobe for 3 years. This was almost just more like, hey, Superman and Batman have teamed up.
They were. I think you just described it the best way. Superman and Batman teamed up, and I would argue that on their way to the finals, when they three-peated, it was Superman and another Superman, because really Shaq didn't separate himself from Kobe in the postseason until they got to the finals. And again, I really think that was about the finals matchups. If I got Shaquille O'Neal and you're single covering him with Dikembe Mutombo, I'm gonna go to him over and over again. He's going to dominate, which he did, single coverage. If you're playing Shaquille O'Neal against Rick Smith, he's going to eat Rick Smith alive, who is a very good player. Can't guard Shaquille O'Neal. Or the Davis brothers can't guard Shaquille O'Neal. And then, obviously, when they played the Nets on the back end of the three-peat, Aaron, I can't remember his name, but it was Todd McCullough and Aaron, I can't remember his last name, but the point is Shaquille O'Neal going up against Todd McCullough, as he would say on TNT, barbecue chicken. And by the way, watch that Nets series. Yes, Shaq was the MVP, but watch what Kobe did. He ate Jason Kidd alive. He ate Kittles alive. He ate Kenyon Martin alive. Like, nobody could guard Kobe.
Yeah, absolutely. Obvious say, and of course, I think you're the only knock with Kobe is the '04 finals. But I think what really separates Kobe and Shaq for me is just the end of the decade, right? Shaq goes to Miami.
Right.
He gives you a couple more, like he's obviously runner up for MVP, I think in '04, '05.
Right.
Gives you a couple of more, higher quality seasons, wins one more ring, and then just really falls off though in Miami, Phoenix, Cleveland, Boston. While Kobe he keeps ascending. And to me, that's the biggest difference is they both started strong. Shaq, to me, if this was who was the best player between 2000 and 2005, I'd put Shaq here. But once I start adding in the back end of the 2000s, when we get Kobe's, he making 3 consecutive finals, winning 2 of them, to me, that's really where he separates itself. And even in the years that he didn't necessarily make finals appearances in those mid 2000s Lakers teams, he was still putting up insane numbers. And the reality is, those mid 2000s Lakers teams were just nothing. There's no way he could have contended or even come close until you got your Pau Gasol, until you got Lamar Odom, Bynum. Finally, it all came together in '08 for him. But for a couple of years, those are just some really bad teams that he's still drugged to the playoffs.
Yeah, well, you're not going to compete with Smush Parker and Chris Milne, and I mean that. Now, granted, some people will make the argument you be careful what you wish for, because a lot of people thought Kobe wanted Shaq gone, and if you were going to pay Kobe what he wanted, you probably weren't going to keep Shaq, which they did. They had to make a choice, and they went with Kobe, which was the right move. And you're right. Those were bad teams. He was an elite player stuck in a bad team. But when they finally made the move and they brought him a Paul Gasol where they gave him a co-star, he took off. It's not an accident that they went to 3 straight finals. And he won 2 of those and won 2 finals MVPs. Right. I think that's where he separated himself from Shaq by what he did on the back end of the decade.
Yeah. So overall, my MVP of the 2000s, Kobe Bryant, also another honorable mention. Obviously, I almost put Tim Duncan here. Tim Duncan is the guy that actually. It's funny because Tim Duncan is a guy I have like all time a little like one spot higher than Kobe. But genuinely, that is not because of what happened in the 2000s. That's more so of like that early 90s run we talked about.
Yeah.
And like that back end, like when we get into the 2010s, to me, that's what separates the two. But in the 2000s, we all knew who the best player was. It was number 24.
Facts. I agree. Yeah. Look, what can you say about everything Kobe did, though? 2 finals MVPs, all the All-Star appearances, all the All-NBA defensive teams, all the All-NBA teams, like every accolade you could want, Kobe achieved. And I think you made a great decision making him the player of the decade because he was.
And that is all for the 2000s. And next week we'll do the 2010s. And then for the 2020s, it's going to be a lot of fun because not only are we going to put together the first 5 years of the 2020s, I'm going to do a little predictive list to try to guess the entire decade.
That's going to be the fun part. Yeah.
So that's also bringing in talking about guys like how do we think, trying to predict how good Cooper Flag's going to be and guys that aren't even in the league yet necessarily. So I think that's going to be a ton of fun. And it's also going to be hard. We got a lot, obviously Wembanyama, guys like that, but also we got Cam, I think his name is Cam Boozer, the son of Carlos Boozer's a really good basketball player. So
he's really nice.
I think that I'm going to have a lot of fun doing that predictive list because I'm going to have to get creative because there's going to be some guys who are going to make that list, I'm guessing, that aren't even in the league yet.
Yeah. That's what makes it fun, though. I think that's going to be a fun list. That'll probably be the list where you get a lot more participation when people react to it because we all have our opinions on what somebody's going to be in the next 3 or 4 years. Just Wemby alone, I think you're going to get a wide range of comments on what he should be or would be. I honestly don't know what Wemby will be. I can tell you what I think he's going to be. But to say, well, yep, in the next 4 years, forget about it. He's going to win all the MVPs and all that. I don't know that. I think he's going to be a terrific player. But for him to do what people are projecting, like we talked about before, you have to have a sidekick, right? The other guy, right?
Yeah.
So if and when he gets his guy, you're going to know. Then we can start talking about, all right, forget it, Western Conference for the next 3-4 years or whatever. It's Wemby's house. But you just never know. How do I know? You brought up the guy's name. How do I know that Cooper Flag doesn't come out and before you know it, he's like, well, I'm taking over. I don't know. That's what makes it interesting. I don't know.
I will say that we did that list of predicting the best players coming into the year before the season started, and I will say my worst pick so far was Tyrese Halliburton. He has got off to a bit of a slow start, but he's picked it up. Yeah, maybe my 11th best player in the league prediction still comes true. He'd have to finish very strong for that. Yeah. But I think so far my best prediction so far was I put Wemby as the 7th best player in the league.
I think you're spot on,
and I think I actually nailed that one.
You know the one that disappointed me. You know what? I'm not going to say disappointed me. The season's not over yet. But there was a young man that we both thought had a legit shot to be Rookie of the Year. And he plays for the Houston Rockets. And I just thought he was going to have a bigger impact. And look, he's not playing terrible. I just think that maybe because the Rockets are one of the deeper teams in the league that Coach Udoka seems to have his rotation set, he doesn't get the opportunity. But we really thought he was going to be a breakout rookie, right? Reed, we thought he was we thought Reed was going to be a breakout rookie, and it just, at least to this point, it has not happened.
Yeah, that's been unfortunate. He hasn't cracked enough playing time. I made the bold prediction before the year started he was going to win Rookie of the Year and Sixth Man of the Year, but that just never amounted. And I think he still has a bright future, but I guess it's just not his time yet. So.
I agree. A bright future. And by the way, a Houston Rocket does have a legit shot to win Rookie of the Year. It's just not him. It's Thompson.
Actually, you know what? My worst prediction so far from my predictive list just might be my Steph Curry has that one final hoorah and makes one last All-NBA first team. Never mind. That's winning it so far. He's been good. He hasn't been Steph Curry.
Right, because 1 minute we're going, Steph was 8 for 9 from 3, and then the next game, Steph was 0 for 10 from, he's been up and down, and I know the Warriors got off to a fast start, but I think the reality of what they actually are is hit. They're not one of the elite teams, and I don't think I don't think they're going to make the big move that you or I or other fans of Steph Curry. I would like them to make that move because I would like Steph to make one more big relevant run in his career. But I don't see it. I don't, because you hear Jimmy Butler, but I honestly don't even think Jimmy Butler's on their radar. I think Golden State is looking at guys like Simons. They might look at Brandon Ingram, although I don't think that's the move, but they might be looking at. It's not that he doesn't have talent. You and I talk about this a lot, Brett. We talk about fit. I don't think Brandon Ingram he doesn't play fast the way Golden State at their best. They play fast. Brandon Ingram is more of a half court kind of guy, right?
Yeah, he's almost like a great value DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah,
the way he likes to hold on to the ball and just
he's a great value.
Like, I saw some Bulls fans like, we should trade for Brandon Ingram. Like, why? You just had DeMar for 4 years. Like, if we really think about it, what is so different between Brandon Ingram and DeMar besides Brandon Ingram shoots like a couple more threes a game?
And you currently have Zach LaVine, so what are you doing?
Right.
What are you doing?
No, absolutely.
Actually, for what it's worth, I think Zach LaVine would fit well in Golden State. I honestly do.
I think Zach LaVine almost gets underrated at times. He's a very good offensive threat. He's been very good again this year. He's putting up numbers similar to what Devin Booker's putting up. He's overall been a very good player again.
His shooting splits are insane.
So half the time, the only thing people get annoyed with Zach LaVine, it seems, is he's so athletic but doesn't want to attack the rim.
Yeah, here's the crazy part. He's got crazy hops, so people want to see the dunk. But he's such a good shooter from distance, he doesn't have to attack the rim.
No, absolutely. Before we get on out of here, Mo, do you want to say any final thoughts, sir?
Just thank the chat. Thank everybody for tuning in, checking out the N1 podcast, rocking with Brett and I as we go through the 2000s all NBA teams. And rock with us again next Thursday at 9 as we do the 2010s. And we try to keep you updated on any other NBA news. We appreciate you guys so much.
And, of course, check us out next Tuesday. We'll talk about the Meaty Boys podcast if you're into professional wrestling. Last week, we reacted to Monday Night Raw, the first one on Netflix. Next week, we'll have a week to sit on it. We'll discuss more about that opening night. And then, of course, there's a whole other episode on Monday. So, everybody, we thank you for tuning in. And I hope everybody has a wonderful night.
Thank you for tuning in to the And One podcast. If you like our content, you can find more on the Wire to Wire Podcast Network on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. Want more And One? Find it on Wire to Wire. Like and share our Facebook page and join the And One Discord. Grab the link to join from our Facebook. Thank you for tuning in and have a wonderful day.